You know, it's so easy for us to judge other people and say, I can't believe that they're still in that relationship. I can't believe they stayed for that long. But what we don't realize is that 95% of the time, we are operating by the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind that has been programmed from our earliest childhood relationships with our primary caregivers or parents. And so what happens in that dynamic as we're growing up, they teach us how we are to be treated. They teach us about relationship dynamics. We view and we see evidence of how relationships should be based on the dynamic that we had as children. And so we bring those into our adult life. So in those years, we are actually learning how to be in dynamic. We're like learning a new language. And that same dynamic, we operate as adults in our own relationships. And that kind of becomes our operating system. It's what we're conditioned. It's our paradigm. It's our truth on how relationships should be. And so there's these ridiculous beliefs in the subconscious, in the conscious collective, that we should be walking away from relationships and we should know better. And we don't really fully understand the relationship dynamics that people have and why they are actually staying. It's like they're supposed to know what relationships are supposed to be like. If someone's never really seen a healthy relationship growing up, how could they possibly leave? Why would they leave a zone of comfort? Your subconscious wants to stay safe. It wants to stay in a very familiar place. So really this journey is about healing the soul psyche, embracing those deeper levels of our consciousness, the self-awareness, and so that we understand where we are coming from, how our mind works. You can do all the incense and the meditation and all the ayahuasca and all this other crap, which is not crap, it's good. But in reality, if your subconscious mind is working 95% of the time, you're always going to be pulled towards what is familiar to you. There's no way to know any better if that's all you've ever known. And so this journey is about practicing this conscious awareness and creating a life that is more in alignment outside of what we know, outside of what we've always known, outside of these patterns that we've learned as children growing up in these dysfunctional households. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. Like, not every relationship is a direct representation of your psyche. I get it. But for the most part, you're operating on what is familiar. You're operating on what you've learned. If you grew up in a household where one parent was always yelling and screaming, or one parent was unavailable, what are you going to do? You've learned that. You're going to take it and go into a relationship, and you're going to take the bullshit from your partner that's yelling at you, raising their voice, and calling you names and all of that. Or you may be with a partner that hasn't shown up for you, that is not available. And I've been through that. In my last relationship, my partner was not available. That person was fighting with whatever demons they were fighting with, in total respect for that. But I was also into familiar. She wasn't available to me, and that was familiar to me because I grew up in a household where I had an emotionally unavailable father. And so that became very familiar territory to me. I didn't know any better. I didn't know to leave. I didn't know until I knew. And so I operated on this notion in this cruise control mode of just knowing what I didn't know. And until you know what you don't know and you know what you don't know, this is how you begin to make a change. And I'm making light of this because I feel like there is some difficulty, but there's also some simplicity to this. It's really getting into those uncomfortable areas of your psyche. And this doesn't mean that you necessarily need to see a psychotherapist. It's good, I did that. But I think it's really getting to understand your patterns, getting to understand what you've grown up with. And this is where inner child work comes in. This is where values assessments come in. And so we can actually do these exercises very simply and really getting to understand what our patterns are. And it's important for us to really begin to stop shaming people and stop judging people for being in relationships when you have no idea what they've grown up with. You have no idea what they've been through in their life. And so we think that we're so cool, and we think that we're so intelligent when we can just look at someone and say, oh, I can't believe that he's being in that kind of relationship, when we have no idea the psyche behind and how their subconscious is behaving and what they've learned through their childhood and what they believe to be a normal paradigm and a normal dynamic. And so I think it's important here that the journey is about forgiving yourself. Also, if you're listening to this and it's triggering some things about, oh man, I stayed in a relationship for 10 years or 20 years or 7 years or 7 months where somebody was talking to me in a certain way or was not available to you, it's important to understand that you need to give yourself some self-compassion. You just didn't know any better. Your subconscious mind was operating on familiarity and wanted to keep you safe. And so the journey is about getting to understand what it is that's keeping you safe so you can create better relationship with yourself first, feel empowered, and then create a very different relationship with someone who's worthy of being in your life. This is what it's about. It's getting that alignment between your mind and your heart. And your mind is operating from your subconscious. We can't create differently if we don't understand our subconscious and how it's operating and how it's been programmed in the past from childhood. So, that was a mouthful. That being said, I've created a workbook. I'd suggest you download it. It's a values workbook. It's absolutely free. So basically it's a workbook where you reconnect to what it is that you truly value. Some of us have forgotten or never taught, or values that were never spoke about in our household growing up as children. It didn't matter what it is that we valued. It's just something that we never talked about. Who talked about values 40 years ago? I had no idea. Nobody talked to me about values. So I've created this workbook because it's so important for you to understand what it is that you value, because that is your North Star. That is your alignment. That is how you align to relationships in your life with your values. And once you understand what it is that you value, then you can create a life that's very different and that is in complete alignment with what it is that's important to you. Whether it's relationships or at work or your career or with a sibling or with a parent, whatever that is. So I hope this has been very helpful, because I think it's important for us to be able to understand that we need to have this synergetic alignment between our mind, our psyche, and our soul and our heart. And there are two different things that are oftentimes we're oscillating between the two. And so I think it's important to be able to connect to that piece, understand our psyche, and that's the understanding who we are is really the beginning of that journey to self-love and to create relationships very differently. So, as always, I hope that was helpful. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next video.